Hello everyone, and welcome back to another deck spotlight. I know we haven't done one of these in a little while, but yeah, I'm hoping to get back into them. We haven't done one for a little while, mostly because we've been waiting for season reset. It's difficult to play a variety of different decks on ladder and get good footage, but with season reset, you can play basically anything. So yeah, here we are with another deck spotlight, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Mutant Marauder Chemical Buggy deck. This is a very popular deck. It's been seeing a bit of an uptick in play. Lately, it's been falling a little bit in popularity due to the rise of Fnatic Aggro. But this deck was one of the most popular decks for quite a while, I'd say. Those of you who've been playing ladder and paying attention will have seen this deck probably quite a lot. But yeah, as I say, it's falling a little bit in popularity to Fnatic Aggro now. But yeah, let's take a look at the deck. So this is the basic deck. Militants, Lasers, Mutant Marauder, Bike, Chemical Buggy, Banshee, and Oksana. So the basic deck, basically, the reason behind these choices is you want rifles and lasers as your cheap early game options. You want to open with barracks, that's why you play rifles instead of wheels, because you want to have access to your Mutant Marauders in the early game. They're your main anti-vehicle unit, so you need to have access to them early on. You play attack bikes because attack bikes are just insane. They're just like one of the best units in the game. So, you know, best cheap anti-air in the game for sure. And then Chemical Buggy, which is the other linchpin of the deck. The Chemical Buggy plus Mutant Marauder combination is the key to the deck. That's why the deck is called Marauder Chuggy. And finally, Banshee. This gives you a little bit of anti-air support. It's mainly great against GDI air, playing things like Talons, Drone Swarm, and Orca, which is something you'll struggle with otherwise. So yeah, we play Banshee as our air-to-air unit. Also gives us more game against Fortress-style decks if they get set up. It gives you a way to get around that. Alright, so let's take a look at some variations. The first variation is the Stealth Tank version. This gives you more game against bombers and air in general. Like, you're just stronger against things like Mohawk, Orca Bomber, Inferno, because the Stealth Tank can one-shot them. And those decks typically tend to play... They're very good anti-air of their own, so Banshee doesn't normally cut it. Like an Inferno deck will almost always play Phantom, so Banshee won't be very useful. But Stealth Tank will still one-shot the Inferno and the Phantom. So the Stealth Tank variant gives a little bit more game there, but it makes you weaker to Fortress-type decks. This version will basically always lose to Artillery, because you can just never reach the Artillery with any of your units. So yeah, that's the trade-off. And the final version is Jade. You can play a Jade variant instead of Oksana. That's perfectly acceptable. The main reason to do this is to give yourself more power against tech decks. Obviously, most tech decks will lose first missile as they have 2 harvesters, and therefore do not have enough pop cap to contest the first missile properly. If that happens, you can then go and Catalyst missile their base to death with Chemical Buggy. Even without Chemical Buggy, you can start throwing missiles at their base as soon as the first missile fires, and you can usually do enough damage with units and Catalyst missiles to take out their base. So this is a variant for if you want to be stronger against tech decks. But it'll make you weaker in normal games. Against normal aggro decks, Oksana is far superior. Oksana boosted Chemical Buggy and Mutant Marauders and Banshee are all absolutely insane units. So yeah, normally I would say you want to play Oksana for general play. But if you're trying to face down tech decks more often than not, then Jade is probably the better choice. Okay, so that's a few of the variants of the deck. Let's take a look at what the deck is strong against and what it's weak against in general. So the main reason to play Marauder Chuggy, I would say, is its biggest strength is against tank-style decks. Just generally ground-based decks, like standard aggro decks. Like if you think of like classic Ceph aggro or a GDI aggro, the kind of thing Alicia Destiny tends to play. Those decks, this deck is very good against, because the Marauders give you a lot of game against War Factory-based decks, and then Chemical Buggy will beat up their infantry that tries to kill off your Marauders. So that's the main reason to play Marauder Chuggy. Those decks are becoming less popular in the metagame now, I'd say. You're seeing a lot more Jade, and we're seeing a lot more air-based decks. So that is one of the reasons Marauder Chuggy is ticking down a little bit. But if these decks, which have been a backbone of Rivals for a long time, come back and become the most popular decks again, then Marauder Chuggy is one of the best counters to them. Another thing this deck is good against is the setup decks. So things like Giga Cannon, MLRS, those kind of things. They tend to be heavily based around these anti-vehicle setup units. And your deck is just not really a War Factory deck, so you end up being a lot stronger against them than most traditional War Factory decks. However, you are still weak to artillery. I'm not going to say that you're going to be great against artillery, because artillery is a whole different ball game. That thing is just insane. The last thing this deck I would say is strong against is the ground-based tech. So things like Titans, Sandstorms, Centurions, even Avatar. You can kill Avatar with stacked up Marauders. 2 Marauders in a concave can take down an Avatar. Enough Marauder spam can definitely kill an Avatar. So yeah, against ground-based tech, the deck is very, very strong. Alright, let's take a look at a few of the weaknesses. I'll say one of the main weaknesses is snipers. Snipers are a big issue for the deck. The deck basically relies heavily on the beefiness of mutant marauders, and snipers can take them down pretty quickly. So snipers with a decent blocker, that means your chemical buggy can't get to the snipers. That can be really difficult to break. The next thing it's weak to is probably the fanatics. This is one of the reasons the deck is on a downswing. Fanatic aggro or fanatic based decks will almost always play a scorpion. Normally you're strong against scorpion based decks, but with fanatic boost, the scorpion can chase down your chemical buggy even when protected by mutant marauders, and fanatics themselves have very high DPS and will take out mutant marauders pretty quickly. So that is a slight weakness. And finally, the last weakness I'd say is air-based decks, primarily bombers. So anything like Drone Swarm and Venom are both pretty good against the deck, but not like completely shut you down. But Orca Bomber and Inferno are both pretty tough, which is one of the reasons to play like the Stealth Tank variant or a Phantom variant. But generally speaking, you just don't really want to be playing Marauder Chuggy if your opponent is bringing a heavily air-based deck. This is, again, like I said earlier, Marauder Chuggy's on a bit of a downtick. Again, it's just because there's a lot of air-based decks now. A lot of decks are air-based. There's a lot of Fnatic decks. So basically, I think right now in the metagame, Marauder Chuggy's a little bit weak. But it is still a tier 1 deck for sure. It's still one of the best decks. You're going to see people playing a deck like this in tournaments. You're going to see people playing this deck in events. You're going to see this deck on ladder. It is a very good deck. It just, at the moment in the current metagame, it's on a bit of a downswing. Alright, so I'm going to add a new section to these videos, which I think I probably should have done a while ago. I normally just cover it in my video footage, but I think it would be good to have a top tips section. So we are going to take a little look at top tips. So here's the top deck tips for Marauder Chuggy. Tip number 1, always keep a Marauder and a Chemical Buggy together. This is the key function of your deck. You are aiming to have a Marauder with a Chemical Buggy at all times. These 2 units should not be split up for a long time. They should always be hanging out together. You want them to be friends, you want to be BFFs, and just always spend all their time together, because they really counteract each other's weaknesses. A Marauder plus a Chemical Buggy is only really weak to air threats. They get capable of dealing with everything else. So tip number 2 is rolls on a little bit from this. You should use the Marauder as a wall and move the Buggy through it as Raider, to use Raider to protect the mutants from the infantry threats. So the idea is you park the Marauders somewhere, and then the Chemical Buggy goes back and forth through them, and then infantry can't push onto the Marauders without getting killed by the Chemical Buggy. And if vehicles come forward to kill your Buggy, you just pull it backwards, and you have the Marauders standing in front. You want to use the Marauders as the wall, because they have much more hit points than the Buggy, and they are an infantry type. Anti-infantry type units tend to do low damage quickly, whereas anti-vehicle units often do lots of damage but in slow bursts, like tank shots or MLRS volleys. So it's better to tank with the infantry that has lots of hit points than with the weak Chemical Buggy. So you want to use Marauder as a wall and use the Chemical Buggy Raider to protect them. And finally, kind of all these tips are kind of the same, but finally the third tip is try to keep your mutants in a central location on the map where they can protect key locations such as pads and routes to your harvester. This deck is best on maps where most of the fighting happens in a single location. So this kind of just rolls on from the previous 2 tips, because this is really the whole deck is just about doing this one thing. So all of the tips kind of work together. You are aiming to just set up Marauders in a place where your opponent is going to have to fight them, and then have a Chemical Buggy protecting them. That is like the whole ball game with this deck. If you watch the best players in the world play this deck, Like, SRPSS is probably the best Marauder Chuggy player. He's the guy who I would credit with creating the deck. I saw him playing this kind of thing way before anyone else, trying it out in tournaments way before anyone else. I think he's the one who made it popular, in my personal opinion. If you watch him play it, if you watch me play it, because I've studied him play it, the way you win with this deck is to set up mutants somewhere that is important on the map, so your opponent has to engage you. Usually, say, on like open water, you just put them in the middle of the map, that kind of thing, so your opponent can't reach the other pads or your harvester without going through you. You park your Marauders as a wall in the front, and then you move your Chemical Buggy through them to protect them from infantry threats. This is the whole reason this deck is good. This is why the deck's nickname is Beef Wall, because you make a wall of the beefy boys out front, and then the Chemical Buggy protects them. So yeah, that's kind of the whole thing. Now we're going to go into some gameplay now. Hopefully we'll have some examples of me doing this. Obviously it's map dependent, so it won't always work, but hopefully there'll be some examples of this happening. I would also like to take this moment to say that another reason this deck is better than Fortress style decks, in my opinion. Fortress style decks fall apart pretty quickly when they're not on a good map for Fortress. Like, if you can't set up in a single location, things like MLRS style decks, they tend to get a lot worse very quickly. Whereas this deck, every unit is still pretty mobile. So the deck still functions just as well on spread out maps. It's just a little bit worse. So it's a better deck for slightly more varied map pools than a classic Fortress style deck. But when you play on a very good Fortress map, Fortress will still be the best deck style you can play. Alright, let's go into some gameplay.
Challenge battle initiated.
Okay. Alright, here we are with the Mutant Chemical Buggy deck. We're up against Bike Rush Odin's. Odin's Misfits.
3, 2, 1. New mission received. Let's go.
So Bike Rush normally goes dogs, MG. There's the first dogs. I think we're actually just going to go straight into War Factory.
What's needed? Building online. Unit ready. Save my soul. The unbelievers will suffer.
He's going straight to MG, ignoring my bikes. Okay. Pretty good map for MGs, obviously. The range map.
Okay, we're ready to.
You're coming for Kane.
Unit ready.
Like you're ready to roll. Revving the engine. You're burning. We're gonna brain him. Launches will kill them all. Advancing.
Unit ready.
Killer moving out. Rev no call. You're
Unit offline.
We're going to boost the Chemical Buggy to kill MGs.
Green machine on the move. Hurl beetle.
Unit offline.
Greedy meat. Good. I'm the one getting sprayed.
Unit
Gonna
offline.
make Marauders now in this one.
Somebody under fire.
Unit
First missile
offline.
here.
Nuclear weapon launched. Major structural damage received.
For Kane.
Water. Our lasers struck it for the field marauders.
Your command. Getting better.
Lasers taking unit offline. Unit
Another
ready.
Chemical Buggy to kill the MGs.
Your command.
Further, brother.
Laser squad.
Let's breathe.
Get us. We can do that.
Chemical, you're getting through.
Unit enhanced. Stop blocking us.
I'm weak. I'm the one. Chem buggy in motion. Spear.
Unit
It's
ready.
a lot easier to kill these MGs when they're equal level.
Ready to wait.
Unit offline.
A lot easier.
Lasers. Oh, black. Make up.
Red advancing. Launches will crush their dial.
What's over there? Unit ready. Hit them with precision. Our lasers will melt.
Whenever I play Bike Rush at max level, because I just can't kill these MGs because when they're over leveled, they're absolutely ridiculous. Looks like he's saving for a Mammoth Tank. I normally plays Mammoth Tank in his deck. And he's gone double harvester, so I'm guessing that's why. We're going to go into Banshee. Give ourselves out if a Mammoth Tank appears.
Green. Good day to spray.
Unit enhanced.
We're going to keep crashing the harvester as well.
Round up every last one.
What's over there? Unit ready. on the move! Field Marauders are not!
Unit offline.
Blast them!
Alright.
Unit
Super good
ready.
hit.
Unit offline.
Dragon drone. Nice.
Unit ready.
That was good though.
Unit enhanced.
Alright, and there you go, guys.
Launched.
Fight versus deck.
Offline.
Not as good at equal levels.
Objective complete. Field control.
Alright. Another game with the Marauder Chuggy deck. Go up against Scaron, who's playing Liang.
3, 2, 1.
I'll talk a little bit about how I play the deck. Generally open with rifles first. I like to scout, make sure I'm not getting rushed. The deck is reasonably safe against rushes anyway, so you don't really need to go rifles first, but I like going rifles first with Nod anyway, because especially against Liang, because he might be playing tech, and you want to start charging the pads as quickly as possible against tech. He also looks like he's trying to stall the pads, so that makes me think even more likely he's playing tech. Alright, so no double harvester yet. We're just going to wait. We're not going to walk into his bikes. Dogs, sorry. I'm going to make bikes. So we're going to go into bikes immediately. We could have made another rifle, a laser, but then we're kind of weak to certain things. Alright, so it's another MG deck. So what we're going to do is we're going to harass these dogs. And then we're going to go chemical buggy. And try and kill off the MG. Alright, we're going to push in here at the same time. We're going to try and get the MG with the chemical buggy. If we do, it looks like. And then we'll take all the pads. Pretty easy missile. And we'll go Marauders. I want to keep rifles near his base so that he can't make an MG without it being harassed by my rifles. And once we have the Marauders, we would normally go Chuggy here, but because he has Talon, we're going to go Bikes. Here comes another MG. We're going to try and harass it whilst it's moving into position. And another one. So yeah, we want to harass these as they're trying to move into position. As you can see, even lasers can do pretty good damage to them whilst they're moving. Alright, and we do take out that one. Looks like he's going for another one. Definitely going chemical buggy now. We're going to force it down the middle of the map with boost. Try and kill these, try and kill off these MGs. We're going to target the one that's still setting up. That'll die quicker. And we're going to change target. Alright, so it looks like we're going to clean up both MGs, which is very nice. And we're going to move on to all the pads, get some lasers middle for this Mohawk. And there you go. Take the game. So the objective of the deck really is to put mutant marauders in the middle of the map and then have a Chuggy protect them from infantry.
Battlefield control.
Scaring again. So we know this guy's playing MGs.
3, 2.
So because we know he's playing MGs, we're actually going to go Harvester first. There's no point scouting with a rifle squad because I know he's going to go Dogs into MGs. So I might just open up with Bikes because I just want to make Bikes and Chemical Buggy in the early game. So we're going to open Bikes and harass the Dogs that we know he's opening with. He might even just go into Pitbulls, which would be fine by me as well because then we can just keep making Bikes. Yeah, he did go Pitbulls, that's fine. We'll just spam Bikes at him for now.
Unit ready. Unit offline.
Wait and see what he does next.
Building online.
Jump jet troopers. Alright, so we'll make rifles because they're cheaper than the chemical buggy. Whoops. Alright, we'll just block this pitfall and that should be first missile. Cool, and we'll get some marauders. Here comes the MG, so we want to harass the MG while it's moving. Even with bikes, it's still fine to harass. We just want to hit it with anything whilst it's still moving. Then we can take it out before it even sets up properly. So yeah, we're gonna back up from this MG because it's set up now. It looks like he's gonna try and turret crawl. So we're gonna set up and push in whenever he tries to move in with them. So we'll take down this one. We're gonna boost and go after the other one as well. Because I really just don't want to let him get MG set up. Right, so we'll pull back out of the MG's range, send another chemical buggy in. Yeah, as long as you catch MGs moving and they're not higher level than you, they're not too difficult to deal with.
Mission accomplished.
Alright, buyer. We're gonna go rifles first and move forwards. Go and scout out what he's up to. He's gone wheels first, so we're gonna back up and wait for some lasers. Might even just go for bikes immediately. He's trying to make sure he can stop my rifleman from getting on the pads. Alright, second wheels. We're just gonna go straight into bikes. He'll probably go bikes or tank. So we're gonna get lasers. Yeah, there's a tank. So we're gonna get some lasers and we're gonna block with the rifles to stop his tank getting to our bikes quickly. And then we'll set up our lasers. Then we're gonna go Marauders for the tank. We're gonna boost them over here, try and clear this pad quickly. I don't think we're gonna be in time though. No. This deck is a little bit weaker early game than my opponent's deck. My opponent's playing not aggro, so he has the strongest early game in the game. So our game plan is going to be a setup Marauder with Chemical Buggy protecting it from militants, basically. That's what we're looking to do here. Like you can see, the Marauders take care of the tank, and then the Chuggy can kill off the militants. And this is basically what you want to be doing with this deck. This is the game plan of the deck. It's to set up this combination. And unless your opponent goes air, it can be very difficult to break. Now there's the air. So we're going to get lasers for the Banshees. Then we'll get some bikes to support the lasers. Really, we need to go into our own air units pretty quickly here. So we're going to move into. We need to keep making Chuggy to stop these militants. And then we do need some anti-air. This bike is causing some problems in PopCap. In fact, we've got quite a lot of PopCap issues. We've got a lot of units on the field that are low squads. We need to get rid of those. As long as we can keep killing off the militants, we can control the game with our infantry. Which is the general game plan of the deck. Try and control the map with our infantry, and then use Chemical Buggy to stop his infantry. We'll make a Banshee now. Good against the tanks and against his Banshees. Here comes some bikes. Shouldn't be a problem here. I think we've locked them out. And there you go. That's pretty much exactly how this deck functions. That was a really good example of how the deck works. Like, you get the Marauders, you plant them in the middle of the map, you use the Chemical Buggy to protect them, and then you just need to make sure you're not weak to air units. If he'd had Venoms, it would have been a lot harder. But the deck he was playing with Wheels and Militants, the like really old school, not aggro, is very weak against the Mutant Marauder Chem Buggy deck.
Battlefield control.
Alright, Jacka86. A Ceph user.
3, 2, 1. New mission.
We're gonna open rifles and see what's up. Okay, Harvester. So he's gonna harvest the rifles. So he's slightly ahead of us in Econ. Maybe like 10 Tiberium. But we need to take control of this pad here. Which isn't, on this map it's not as exciting because obviously he can just move on to the other pad. We don't really gain anything from doing it. Apart from we do scout for a rush, that's all we really gain. Okay, so he's pushed into me for some reason. I think this is a pretty big misplay by my opponent, honestly. This just lets me win the rifle war here. So yeah, he's just given up his early game advantage. Or like, the early game stalemate, he's just conceded it to me. I now have the early game advantage. Alright, so he's gone straight into Venom. We're gonna go into Bikes. Venom is Venom Banshee combo is very strong against this deck. Something you definitely need to be aware of. If your opponent just spams Venoms and Banshees, it can be very hard to beat. So we're gonna go Chemical Buggy because we need something more powerful than Militants to kill off his infantry. There's the Banshee. Gonna try and block it. We don't manage to block it, unfortunately. And we'll Bikes top. His deck is more powerful than ours in the early game, so we are going to lose the first missile. Like I said before, if someone just makes Venoms and Banshees, it can be extremely difficult to beat with this deck. And it looks like that's what my opponent's going to do. Alright, so he's Drill Podded to protect his Banshee harassing my Harvester. We're going to Chem Buggy. He does get the Harvester as well.
Harvester ready. Our base is under attack. Unit ready. Unit ready.
We're probably going to need Banshee for this Tick Tank. Here comes another Tick Tank. I need to go into Banshees for these.
Unit ready. Unit offline. Unit ready. Unit offline.
We do need to get on these pads as well. We'll go Banshees and Lasers. And we'll make another Chemical Buggy for his infantry. Surprised he didn't make infantry, honestly. I was really expecting a lot more infantry here. So we are going to take second missile. That looked like a second Harvester. Not sure why. Must be some kind of tech unit in the deck. But we're going to harass it a little bit. I'm going to try and get this tech tank as it moves.
Unit offline. Unit offline.
Maybe it was a misclick. The fact he's now sending it to the pad makes me think it was almost certainly a misclick.
Unit ready. Unit offline.
We're just blocking from getting on this bottom pad and we should win. Alright, very nice. Hopeful that he misclicked that second Harvester. Pretty sure that must have been a misclick.
Enemy base destroyed.
Alright guys, so there's some gameplay with the Marauder Chuggy deck. As I said during the video, the best way to play the deck is to try and set up your Mutant Marauder and then protect it with a Chemical Buggy from infantry. The deck is very strong against ground-based decks, but can be a little bit weak to air-based decks because your anti-air is a little weak. Like I said at the start of the video, you can play a variant with the Phantom instead of the Banshee, which will make you stronger against air, or even a Stealth Tank instead of the Banshee. That's the original build of the deck, had Stealth Tank instead of Banshee, but then you are slightly weaker to Fortress-style decks. So, you know, it's a trade-off. You need to pick whichever deck is best for you for the scenario. Generally speaking, the deck is good on maps where you're close together and you want to fight in a single location. The deck's pretty good on things like Fighting Pit, pretty good on Battlefield, a lot worse on like Open Prairie where you want to split up a lot, and it's okay on Bullseye. It's difficult to set up a proper cordon on Bullseye, but it's okay. And then like Sandbar is a bad map for it because you want to be fighting on two separate pads. You don't want to be fighting over a single location. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the Mutant Marauder Spotlight. I think this is a very good deck. I would say this is like a tier 1 deck for sure. It's definitely the Mutant Marauder Chuggy is one of the best decks in the game. You see a lot of people playing it. Other variants as well, you can play Jade instead of Oksana, because then you have the out of Chemical Buggy plus Jade to destroy your opponent's base if they're playing Tech. But yeah, I think this is the best variant, and the main difference is what this last Banshee should be. I think these 5 units are definitely the best version, and then the Banshee can be multiple different units. Alright guys, see you next time.